Log 0401 hours. A sound came from the salt. It wasn't a voice at first, more like a prayer whispered through stone, carried by grains breaking against each other. The darkness of the cave pressed in, heavy, colder than it should have been. I heard syllables without meaning, a rhythm, fractured, as if the words themselves had been buried alive. The sound thickened, folding back into itself. Then, the white mass at the center of the chamber shifted. Cracks ran across its surface in jagged lines. Each break carried the dry snap of bone splitting. Dust lifted, shimmering faintly as it caught the low light. It smelled sharp, metallic, as though the air itself had rusted. We stood still. No one moved. The sound didn't stop. It pulsed, like breath, like something remembering how to breathe after centuries. From the fissure came a scatter of noise, not human, not animal. Thousands of tiny impacts, as if salt were falling in endless cascades, but with weight behind it, deliberate, patterned. I felt the pressure in my jaw, my skull, the grinding of invisible teeth. Every grain seemed to strike from inside my head. Someone whispered a fragment of scripture. The response was instant. The cracks widened, lightless and deep, as though they cut through into another sky. The prayer broke apart, mangled, smothered by the grinding hail. My mouth dried, my tongue raw with the taste of ash and brine. Then, the scream. One figure fell forward, knees hitting the stone. His cry tore through the cave, but ended too soon, cut off like a wire snapped. When the echo settled, the chamber was silent again, except for the slow drift of salt against the floor. A veil of pale dust covered the man's outline. Nothing else remained. I didn't speak. None of us did. We breathed shallow, straining not to disturb the air, as though even the sound of lungs might wake the thing inside. My hand moved on its own, pen scratching the log. Log 0401 hours. A sound came from the salt. The words looked too thin on paper. They couldn't hold the weight of what pressed against us, what shifted beneath the crust. A murmur tried to form again, rolling through the cave in broken syllables. Not a language, not yet, just the thread of one. The mass settled. For a moment I thought the cave itself would collapse, but the cracks stayed, faintly luminous in the dark, like scars refusing to heal. The dust continued to fall in steady rhythm, a silent metronome measuring a time none of us could endure. I kept writing, though the pen shook. I wrote because silence felt more dangerous. I wrote because the record had to begin somewhere, and it began at 0401 hours when the salt remembered its voice. Chicago never felt colder than the week the letter arrived. I was in my office at the Oriental Institute, papers stacked on every surface, the desert locked away in photographs and fragments of pottery. The window rattled with February wind. On my desk, an envelope without a return address, only the seal, red, pressed with a cross inside a circle. Vatican correspondence. I read it twice before I believed it. An invitation. No, more than that. A summons. The Vatican Archaeology Division requested my presence on a classified excavation near the Dead Sea. All expenses arranged. Confidentiality required. Departure within 72 hours. I should have questioned why they wanted me. I'm not the most famous in my field, but the Institute had funded some of my earlier digs in Jordan. I had handled scroll fragments, ossuaries, relics that still carried the dust of antiquity. Maybe that was enough. Maybe they wanted someone quiet, someone who knew how to keep his notes to himself. That night, I walked along the Chicago River, the wind carrying ice through the streets. The city was alive with lights, but I felt separated, already half pulled into another world. I thought of the Institute's library, of the shelves I had grown comfortable in. It seemed almost a betrayal to leave them for something so undefined. The flight out of O'Hare was long, the kind where Hours melt into recycled air and the dim flicker of movies no one really watches. I carried only one bag. The rest of the equipment would be provided. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I unfolded the letter again, tracing the Latin phrase at the bottom, Custodi secretum, guard the secret. Rome was rain-soaked when we landed. I was met not by assistants but by two men in black coats. They guided me through Fiumicino without speaking, past customs, into a waiting car. The driver said nothing. We cut through the city until the cobblestones grew slick under the tires, the domes of St. Peter's looming against a stormy sky. Inside the apostolic palace, the air smelled of stone and wax. There, for the first time, I met Monsignor Hale. He was tall, pale, with eyes that never lingered longer than a second on anything. His words were few, precise. "Dr. Harper, you've agreed to assist us. You will follow our protocol. No deviation." I nodded. "Yes, Monsignor." "Good." He gestured to the man beside him. "This is Father Anton. He will oversee the dig." Father Anton was different. His face carried deep lines, not of age, but of fatigue. He didn't smile. He offered his hand, and when I shook it, it felt dry, like paper. "You've read the terms?" he asked. "I have." "Then you understand." That was all. No blessing, no pleasantries. Just understanding that was more command than consent. That night I stayed in a small guest room near the Vatican archives. I couldn't sleep. The walls were lined with books in Latin and Italian. The rain tapped against the glass. I thought I heard chanting once, faint and distant, though it may have only been the storm. I wrote in my notebook, recording impressions, though part of me wondered if anyone else would ever read them. The next day, we flew east. Hours folded into silence until the desert spread below us. The Judean wilderness looked endless from above, an ocean of dust and stone. We landed near Qumran. Trucks waited to take us the rest of the way. Soldiers in the uniform of the Swiss Guards stood watch, though their colors were muted, stripped of the ceremonial bright. No flags, no insignia. This was Vatican presence without acknowledgement. The base was hidden against the rock, a series of white tents and steel containers pressed into the cliffside. Generators hummed. Spotlights pointed outward, away from the dig, as if to guard not what was outside, but what might emerge from within. The desert wind rattled canvas and carried grit into every seam. That night, introductions were made in the largest tent. Dr. Navarro from Spain, restless, sharp-eyed, with the tone of a man always ready for argument. Sister Miriam, quiet, her hands folded as if in constant prayer, responsible for record-keeping and the water of blessing. Commander Reyes, silent as stone, armed, his gaze fixed beyond us as though we weren't worth noticing. We ate together at long tables, metal trays clattering. Navarro complained about the food, about the secrecy, about the absurdity of Vatican officials pretending to run an excavation. "Archeology belongs to science," he said. His accent made the words sharper. Father Anton lifted his eyes only once. "This ground belongs to something older than science." That ended the conversation. The air carried the tang of salt. It coated the skin, burned the lips. Even without seeing the object, I felt we were already inside its reach. My tongue tasted brine with every breath. The rules were read aloud after the meal. Monsignor Hale spoke them without ceremony, as if listing items in an inventory. Father Anton stood beside him, watching each of us. Rule 1. No contact with the artifact by bare hand. Rule 2. No allowed reading of any inscription. Rule 3. No contact between the artifact and holy water. Rule 4. No fewer than 3 witnesses present at any attempt to open the seal. Rule 5. All records submitted directly to Vatican custody. No duplicates, no exceptions. Silence followed. The wind rattled the tent walls. No one raised a question. Hale dismissed us with a nod. As we stepped outside, Navarro broke it first. "This is theater," he muttered in Spanish. "Superstition dressed as science." Father Anton heard him. "Rules are survival," he said. His voice was low, flat. "Ignore them, and you won't return." Sister Miriam crossed herself. Her eyes avoided Navarro entirely. Later, walking the perimeter with Reyes, I tried to make conversation. "You've been stationed here long?" He didn't look at me. "Long enough." "What are we guarding against?" "The ground," he said. Nothing more. That night the desert sounded alive. Wind scraped against stone. Somewhere in the cliffs an owl cried. I lay awake in my cot, notebook open, repeating the rules in ink as if writing them down could anchor me. Rule 1 through Rule 5. I wrote them carefully, as if repetition might fix their meaning. But part of me thought what Navarro thought. These were relics of faith imposed on excavation. Protocols meant to scare, not to guide. I believed in methods, in science, in carbon dating and stratigraphy. Salt could preserve, salt could destroy. But salt did not speak. The desert disagreed. Even in silence, I felt it waiting. The cave mouths yawned like wounds in the cliff, and the air carried the sound of prayers not yet spoken. I told myself it was imagination. I told myself I was tired, but the words of Father Anton lingered longer than I wanted. Rules are survival. The first days of excavation passed in silence. We worked under the white glare of floodlights, the desert wind carrying grit into every fold of clothing. The object lay half unearthed in the hollow of the cave, encased in its crust of salt. We logged temperature, humidity, seismic stability. Every reading was ordinary. Every chart looked like it belonged to a survey, not to a secret. On the fourth day, I held the recorder against the wall, the needle steady. The air should have been still. Yet I thought I felt movement, a faint vibration against my wrist. I lowered the instrument, pressed my ear close. Nothing, only the blood in my own pulse. Later, while recalibrating sensors, I heard it again. A faint exhale, not wind, not draft, but a sound contained inside the white mass. I wrote it down. Log. 1600 hours, audible crack detected. The others noticed my pause. "Problem?" Navarro asked, his tone sharp, impatient. "Maybe stress in the structure," I said. "Salt fractures with pressure. Could be settling." "Or it breathes," Miriam whispered. She gripped her notebook tighter. Her knuckles whitened. Anton stepped forward. "Write what you observe. Nothing more." We obeyed. But the cave did not. The sound came again, a brittle snap followed by a scatter of dust. Grains trickled down the side of the mass, leaving a thin scar behind. Navarro crouched beside it, lamp angled low. "There are marks here. Inscriptions." Anton's voice cut across him. "Don't speak them." Navarro ignored him. His lips moved, barely sound. He read fragments under his breath, syllables half-formed. At first it seemed like nothing. Then the surface trembled. The crack widened, sharp and sudden, like glass under strain. Dust poured into the air, white against the black of the cave. A note rang out, pure, metallic, like the bell of a cathedral struck and shattered. It hung in the air far longer than it should have. Miriam flinched, covering her ears. "Stop! Please!" Anton seized Navarro by the collar, dragging him back. "Rule 2. Never allowed." Navarro twisted free. "They're just letters, nothing more." "They're not letters," Anton said. His voice was steady, cold. "They're wounds. Every word cuts." We examined the surface again. Where the dust had fallen, patterns emerged, lines intersecting, curved, deliberate, not cracks, carvings. They formed the faint outline of a wing, feathers etched as if in flight, but turned rigid, fossilized in salt. I wrote without looking up, my pen scraping the page. The surface reveals winged pattern, approximate span 2 meters. Reyes kept his distance, weapon ready though useless against stone. "You want me to intervene?" he asked. "No," Anton said. "You want to live, you don't speak." Navarro laughed, though his eyes were nervous. "So the church fears its own shadow now?" I tried to reason with him. "Stress fractures can mimic patterns. Pareidolia. Seeing wings in stone doesn't mean..." But my words felt hollow. The lines were too precise, the symmetry undeniable. The salt was not breaking. It was unveiling. We stayed longer than we should have, staring, recording, measuring. My notes grew erratic. Noise increased at 1630, dust persistent, subject surface unstable. My handwriting wavered. Navarro wouldn't let it rest. He kept circling the mass, lamp beam flicking across its surface. "Look at this feather," he said. "The detail. You think salt just chooses this?" "It's coincidence," I said, though I didn't believe myself. "Crystal growth, mineral stress." He cut me off. "You're as blind as the priests. Science can see what faith refuses." Anton stepped between us. "Science has limits. Faith is the line that keeps you alive." Navarro spat near his feet. "Limits are for the fearful." Miriam spoke, her voice thin. "Please, don't fight here." She was trembling. I saw the flask of holy water clutched against her chest, as if afraid it might leap from her hands on its own. The sound came again, louder, layered. A breath, then another, overlapping until it was almost a chant. Not words, not yet, but rhythm. The kind of rhythm that belongs to liturgy, to litany. I swallowed hard. My training told me to analyze resonant frequency, airflow, possible seismic activity. But my body knew otherwise. The hairs on my arms rose. My heart hammered. Every instinct said we weren't alone. Navarro muttered another fragment of text under his breath. This time I heard it clearly. Malek, Hebrew, angel. He barely spoke it before Anton struck the lamp from his hand. It clattered across stone, light scattering wild against the walls. "Rule 2, Anton said again, his voice sharp as iron. "You think it's nothing? That word has weight. You give it breath and it breathes back." The dust settled slowly. Where the lamp had rolled, its beam cut across new lines. Feathers, entire and unbroken now, carved deep. Not random, deliberate, an image formed of wings folded in restraint, pressed into crystal like fossils of flight denied. Reyes shifted, uneasy, his boots grated. "Whatever this is, it's not natural." "Natural's irrelevant," Anton said. "It's bound, that is all." Navarro sneered. "And you'd keep it buried forever, wouldn't you? Afraid of what knowledge costs?" Anton didn't flinch. "Afraid of what pride destroys." We ended the session there, but none of us left easy. Miriam refused to put down her flask. Navarro stalked ahead, muttering. Reyes kept scanning the dark as though something might follow us out. And I kept hearing the bell note still hanging in my ears, long after the dust had settled. Back in my tent, I tried to write. The words fell short. Acoustic anomaly at 1600. Inscription visible resembling avian wings. It read like data. But I remembered the scream cut short, the silence that followed, the dust falling like snow. Data didn't carry weight. The cave did. I tried again in my private notebook. Something inside is not dead. It waits. That night, as I closed my eyes, I still heard it. The breath drawn through salt, the bell ringing where no bell should be, the rhythm of something preparing to speak. The argument didn't end when we left the chamber. Navarro stormed into the mess tent, slamming his tray onto the table so hard that water sloshed over the edge. "You can't silence words," he snapped at Anton. "This isn't a monastery. It's a site. Knowledge belongs to the world." Anton stood opposite him, arms crossed. His shadow fell across the lantern light. "Knowledge belongs to truth, and truth can kill." Navarro scoffed. "Superstition, always the same with your kind. afraid of history, afraid of evidence. You bury what you can't control. And you dig until you unearth fire, Anton replied. His tone was level, but it carried weight. Fire consumes more than the man who strikes it. I tried to intervene. We don't know what we're dealing with yet. The data. There is no data for this, Navarro cut in. He jabbed a finger at me. You saw it. The feathers, the shape. You want to hide behind graphs, but even your science admits what we touched tonight was deliberate. Miriam's voice was small, but it carried across the tent. We broke Rule 2. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the flask she still carried. The words were not meant to be spoken. Navarro wheeled on her. So what? A curse? Do you believe in curses, sister? Should we pray the artifact back to sleep? She recoiled, clutching the flask tighter. I believe silence keeps us alive. Reyes finally spoke from the corner, his voice like stone dragged over stone. I've guarded sites for years. I've seen ruins, relics, bones. Nothing ever moved until tonight. Nothing ever breathed. You do well to treat it like a weapon until proven otherwise. Navarro sneered, but said nothing. His hands shook slightly as he picked up his fork, though he never lifted the food to his mouth. Anton didn't move closer, but his words lingered like command. What we touched tonight wasn't discovery. It was warning. And if you treat warning like invitation, you won't survive to record it. The tent went quiet. Only the generators hummed outside, steady as a heartbeat. I watched Navarro's jaw tighten, his defiance burning, but beneath it I saw fear. He masked it with anger, but it was there. I felt my own pulse match the generator's rhythm, too quick, too loud. I told myself it was fatigue, but I knew better. The sound from the cave was still with me. It had followed us out, and none of us, no matter how loud we argued, could drown it out. The fracture spread further the following night. None of us had touched it. None of us had spoken. But salt doesn't wait for permission. It breaks when it wants. We gathered in the chamber at dawn, our lamps casting long shadows. The white crust had split in 2 clean lines. From the opening protruded shapes no mineral should have formed. They weren't random. They were structured, layered, the ridges overlapping in a pattern I recognized too quickly. Feathers, each one sharp as crystal, translucent, refracting light in narrow beams. A wing, folded, trapped in stone. When the first feather cracked loose, it fell against the floor with the sound of steel on steel. A clash too heavy for its size. The second followed, then a third, until the chamber echoed with an invisible chorus, each note slicing into the air. Miriam covered her ears, tears brimming. Navarro pressed forward, eyes alight with triumph. Anton barred his way. "Stand back," Anton ordered. His voice trembled for the first time. Navarro laughed. "Do you see it? Proof. Tangible proof. Not fragments, not rumor. This is a record older than Scripture." "This is not proof," Anton replied. "It's sentence." The debate might have torn the room apart if not for the folder Reyes carried in under orders from Rome. He set it on the crate beside me, sealed in red wax. My name was scrawled across the front. I broke it open with shaking hands. Inside lay brittle pages copied from the Vatican secret archives. The signature at the bottom read, "Archivist Bianchi." The text was written in Latin, annotated with English notes. My eyes snagged on the translated line, bold and clear. It's not demon that was sealed. It's the archangel himself. I read it aloud before I realized what I had done. The chamber fell silent. Navarro stared. Miriam whispered a prayer under her breath. Reyes only shifted, hand on his weapon, though it was useless. Anton's gaze fixed on me. "Now you see," the salt shuddered. A sound rose from within, not breath, not exhale. Words, fragmented, distant, broken by centuries, but words. Not prison, judgment. Navarro stepped forward. "Who speaks?" The reply came slow, like stone dragged across stone. Michael. The syllables fractured, warped, but clear enough to strike through marrow. Miriam collapsed to her knees, clutching the flask of holy water as if it could protect her. No, no, it cannot be him. Angels do not fall. Anton's voice cut through her sobs. They do when they exceed command. The salt wing twitched. More feathers split loose, clattering against the rock. Each strike resonated like a tolling bell, yet off-pitch, discordant. I felt it in my teeth, a vibration down the spine. Navarro was grinning. This is revelation. You tried to bury it. But now the world will know. Michael imprisoned by his own lord for defiance. What greater evidence of corruption could exist? Anton advanced on him. Don't mistake revelation for liberation. The seal was mercy. What lies behind it is not gift but warning. Their argument rose, voices colliding with the echoes in the chamber. Miriam wept, whispering fragments of psalms. Reyes barked an order for silence, but none obeyed. My hands shook as I turned the pages in Bianchi's file. The document spoke of an intervention long erased from official canon. Michael, not content to defend heaven, had acted without command, judged where judgment was not his. For that he was bound, not cast down, but sealed, hidden where salt could preserve both him and his punishment. The voice came again, sharper. Not fallen, chained. Each pause was long, each syllable dragging as though through a throat of stone. Release, no, judgment, I tried to ask, though my throat was dry. Are you prisoner? Silence, then softer. Witness, Navarro nearly shouted. It speaks. You hear it, all of you. This is no myth. This is testimony. Anton turned to him, fury restrained. And testimony requires silence. If you listen, you may live. If you answer, you will not. Navarro spat. I will not cower behind rules written by men too afraid to face truth. The wing cracked wider, extending from the mass as though straining against invisible bonds. Salt fell in sheets, burning the skin where it touched. Reyes cursed, pulling me back. We need to contain this. Anton shook his head. Containment ended when it spoke. I wanted to believe it was physics. Pressure release, mineral fracture, echoes of sound carried by crystalline structure. My mind scrambled for explanation. But no science accounted for words that formed coherent meaning. No geology explained judgment whispered through stone. The air thickened, heavy as water. My lungs fought to draw breath. Miriam collapsed fully now, rocking, repeating prayers as though rhythm might drown out the other rhythm growing beneath. Navarro advanced again, defiant. Michael, if you are here, tell us why. Tell us what your Lord has hidden. The answer came like thunder muffled in sand. Not Lord, not yours, not mine, justice. The chamber shook, lamps flickered, dust rained from the ceiling. Navarro fell to his knees, but not in reverence. His eyes were wide, desperate, hungry. You see, even angels rebel, even the faithful bleed. Anton finally broke, his voice rising into near shout. You call this rebellion? This is what restraint looks like. The worst punishment is not exile, it's silence. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for all of us. The wing pressed outward, feathers splitting into shards, each clatter ringing like struck iron. The sound merged into a rhythm that could have been chant, but twisted, fractured. Witness, not prison, judgment, unfinished. I closed the file with shaking hands. Bianchi's final note lingered in my head. The scroll of salt is not a seal against evil. It's a barrier against his return. I realized then why Rome had sent us, not to discover, not to prove, but to watch, to keep the record alive in case the barrier failed. We weren't excavators, we were witnesses. Anton looked at me, his voice quiet again. Now you understand why the rules exist. They're not theater. They're the only thin line between silence and release, and Rome. Rome digs because silence terrifies them more than truth. I wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. I could still hear the feathers striking stone, a sound that belonged to judgment itself. And judgment was awake. The argument did not subside. Navarro rose again, brushing dust from his coat, his face lit with manic conviction. This changes everything. The hierarchy of heaven is not eternal. Even Michael himself can be chained. What does that say about the God you serve? Anton's reply was swift, sharp. It says nothing of God. It says everything of pride. Michael did not fall to corruption. He fell to his own certainty. That is what you mirror now. Navarro's voice cracked with fury. And you? You'd rather keep humanity blind? You'd rather lock truth in a cave because it frightens you? Truth without reverence is ruin, Anton said. His hands clenched at his sides. You mistake revelation for weapon. Knowledge becomes curse when wielded in arrogance. Navarro advanced until their foreheads nearly touched. Then let curse come. I'd rather die with eyes open than live chained by silence. The chamber seemed to pulse with their words. Each exchange rattled through the salt, each syllable sparking another tremor. More feathers loosened, drifting like snow made of glass, each one shattering on the stone with a clang that made Miriam cry out. She collapsed forward, clutching her head. Stop it, both of you, can't you hear? It isn't debate, it's command. Every word we speak, it repeats. I turned. She was right. Beneath their shouting, the voice was layering itself. Fragments of their words echoed back, warped and delayed. Truth, curse, silence. The salt was listening. Worse, it was learning. Miriam's tears streaked white as the dust clung to her skin. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. I prayed for strength. I believed obedience kept us safe. But nothing in Scripture prepared me for this. Angels are not meant to be buried. Angels are not meant to bleed. Her voice broke, rising into a sob. If even Michael can be punished, then none of it is true. None of it. What we worship is only fear. Anton reached for her, but she pulled back violently, retreating into the corner. She whispered the psalm again, though this time it sounded like mockery of itself, hollow and broken. Navarro seized on her despair, pointing at her. See? Even the faithful crumble when faced with evidence. This is why Rome fears it. This is why they hide it, because truth unmakes devotion. Anton's face twisted with grief, but he did not answer Navarro. Instead, he looked to me. Write what you see, not for them, for the record. If we die here, the truth must at least carry warning. I looked at my notes. My pen hovered, useless, because the truth on the page was no longer science, no longer measurement. It was confession. It was fear. The sound of feathers striking stone continued, and over it the fractured voice repeated, witness, curse, judgment, silence. No one spoke again, not because they agreed, but because the cave itself had joined the argument, and none of us wished to give it more words to use against us. The cave did not wait for us to choose silence. It answered itself. The voice multiplied, fracturing into hundreds, then thousands. The sound rose like a liturgy inverted, a choir split apart and rearranged until no syllable matched the last. Every wall carried the resonance. The floor shook in rhythm with the broken chant. It was as though the salt had remembered every prayer ever spoken inside stone and spat them back in ruin. Our instruments failed first. Screens flickered, split down the center. Glass shattered in unison, the shards rattling against the rock as if shaken by invisible hands. The seismograph needles spun wild. Light sparked, burst, left us in strobing shadows. I grabbed for my recorder, but it hissed, the tape curling into ash. Reyes barked, "Back! Out now!" His voice barely carried over the rising roar. We stumbled against one another, but the cave had no exit left in it. The walls pulsed, bending inward and outward as if breathing. Shadow and salt collided, blurred, reformed. Perspective broke. My stomach turned with vertigo. Then Miriam screamed. Her flask slipped from her grasp, striking stone. The cap flew loose. A few drops scattered across the white mass. The reaction was instant. Steam burst upward, acrid, searing. The chamber filled with the stench of burned metal. A cry tore through the salt, deeper than human, wider than the chamber itself. It shook marrow. Miriam collapsed, clutching her ears, blood streaking from her nose. The white surface blackened where the drops touched, fissures splitting out like veins of fire. Anton shouted in Latin, words tumbling rapid, desperate. The chant of the voice faltered, then returned louder, furious. Navarro had staggered to the edge, still staring as though wonder outweighed terror. "Do you see it? Do you see?" He reached for the wing. Before any of us could stop him, the salt shifted. A section of it collapsed forward, not breaking, but folding around him. His shout turned into a muffled howl as he was dragged against the surface. The salt surged, swallowing him up to the chest, then the throat. His eyes met mine for one instant, wide, unbelieving. Then his face hardened, crusted, split. He froze mid-cry, transformed into brittle saltstone. A crack ran down his cheek. Dust fell where breath should have been. Navarro was gone. Miriam shrieked, "God have mercy!" She tried to rise, stumbled, fell again. The flask rolled across the floor, still spilling drops that hissed wherever they landed. Reyes fired a shot into the wing, though Anton yelled against it. The bullet shattered on contact, ringing like struck anvil. The echo doubled, tripled, filling the chamber with overlapping screams. Reyes swore, racking the rifle again, but the weapon jammed. Sparks spit from the barrel as though the metal itself rejected violence. The floor split. Cracks zigzagged beneath us, opening into black mouths. Light poured upward, red and blinding, though no fire burned. The chant broke into laughter, too many voices at once, too synchronized to be human. The sound pierced behind the eyes, scraping thought itself raw. Anton dropped to his knees, both hands raised, words spilling in Latin prayer. "Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus!" His voice shook but held. He prayed louder, as though volume could outmatch eternity. I stumbled against the wall, clutching at the rock to steady myself. My pen tore through the page as I tried to write. All instruments failed. Voice multiplied. Navarro lost. The letters swam before my eyes. The cave convulsed. Salt rained down in sheets. Miriam crawled toward Anton, sobbing, whispering pieces of psalms. Reyes seized her arm, hauling her upright. "Move! Out! Now!" His words were clipped, survival distilled to command. But there was no out. The entrance seemed farther with every step. The geometry had twisted. Every lamp beam bent, swallowed, reflected back wrong. My vision blurred, doubled. For every one of us I saw two shadows, then three, then none. The voice struck again, a single note stretched into forever. The salt wing unfurled another fraction, feathers splitting, shards scattering like shrapnel. One grazed Reyes's shoulder, carving fabric and skin in a single line. He didn't scream. He only shoved Miriam ahead, eyes locked on the exit that might not exist. Anton's prayer cracked, but he did not stop. His words shook with grief, with fury. "Non nobis Domine, non nobis, sed nomine tuo de gloriam." The cave answered with its own twisted liturgy. Not yours, not glory, judgment. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the sound was inside, not outside, every tooth a bell, every bone a drum. My thoughts scattered. I tried to remember Chicago, the river, the quiet of winter nights. It vanished. Only the salt remained. Reyes forced us toward the narrowing passage. Behind us, the statue that had been Navarro froze mid-cry, transformed into a statue of salt. As the cave shook, the statue cracked apart, shards raining down, dust blowing across the chamber like ash. The wing pushed further outward, straining. Each movement scraped the stone raw as if the mountain itself were splintering. We stumbled into the tunnel. The roar followed, not fading, but growing closer. Reyes shoved Miriam ahead again. "Run!" Anton stumbled beside me, still praying, voice shredded but unbroken. The tunnel shook. Stones fell. The world became collapse. The last I saw of the chamber was the wing, fully extended, each feather burning white, each one falling with the sound of iron striking iron. Navarro's remains dissolved into the air. The voice surged, layered, endless. We ran, and the salt ran with us. The tunnel did not stay true. As we stumbled forward, the walls stretched and doubled. Miriam ran beside me, but when I turned my head, I saw two of her, one weeping, one laughing, their voices overlapping. My own shadow split into three, each moving at a different speed. When I blinked, they fused again, only to scatter a breath later. Laughter broke from the walls, not Navarro's, not ours. Hundreds of voices, all too perfect, timed like a choir mocking every step. Between the laughter came sobbing, layered until I could not tell which sound belonged to us and which to the stone. It pressed against my skull until balance deserted me. Reyes shoved me forward. "Ignore it. Keep moving." His own voice fractured, echoing twice as if another Reyes shouted from just behind and another from far ahead. For a heartbeat I thought there were more soldiers. But no. Only him, multiplied by the cave. Anton faltered. He pressed his hands to his head, prayer spilling broken. Sanctus, Sanctus, Deus. The words doubled, echoed back wrong. The cave spoke his prayer in reverse. Syllables garbled until his voice seemed swallowed by its own reflection. He nearly fell, but Miriam caught him, though she was trembling with terror. The passage opened wider, then constricted so tight we scraped our shoulders raw. Geometry did not obey. One step stretched into 10, another collapsed distance so that we slammed into each other, staggering. The lights from our lamps spun circles, reflecting against walls that shouldn't have shone. My breath fogged, though the air burned hot, searing salt into my lungs. Then, without warning, the sound stopped. Every echo cut away, leaving silence so heavy it felt like weight pressing us flat. For a moment we thought it was over, but silence itself became the loudest sound. In it, I could hear my own heartbeat, multiplied, distorted, as though the cave was recording it and playing it back faster, slower, never the same. Miriam sobbed, whispering, "This isn't real. It can't be real." Her double whispered the same words an instant later, like a cruel parody. The two voices collided, then merged into one scream that wasn't hers at all. Reyes fired another round into the dark. The flash lit dozens of faces for an instant, our faces, repeated along the walls, each one screaming in silence. Then the light died, and the tunnel returned, unchanged, as though mocking us for seeing too much. We ran harder. The cave bent again. Somewhere behind, the voice returned, fractured into countless fragments. Witness, not silence, judgment. It carried after us, and though our legs ached, though lungs tore with heat, none of us dared slow. Because in every reflection, in every false echo, we saw what happened to Navarro, and none of us wanted to become salt. When the collapse came, it was not sudden. It was slow, grinding, like the world deciding to erase itself inch by inch. We stumbled through the last corridor, the roar chasing us, salt dust filling every breath. The ground tilted beneath my feet. Then, without warning, we were outside. The night air struck like water after drowning. Stars overhead. Silence, almost. The silence was broken by Miriam's scream. She clawed at her face, her eyes clouded white, streaked with lines where the salt had burned into them. Reyes dragged her down the slope, shouting for medics. She thrashed, sobbing, blind to the desert around her. The flask she'd carried was gone, buried in the chamber with everything else. Anton never came out. One moment he was beside me, his voice ragged in prayer. The next, he was gone. Whether swallowed in the collapse or carried by the voice, I could not tell. I wanted to look back, but the passage sealed itself with dust and stone. Only silence behind us and the sound of Miriam's screams. Navarro was already lost. The last image of him lingered in my mind, half formed into salt, his body split and hardened, eyes wide with disbelief. When the wing extended, he'd become part of it. The cave had claimed him as ornament, not victim. I doubt there was enough left to bury. Reyes called for extraction. The radios crackled, static cutting through the desert night. Finally, a voice answered. Monsignor Hale. Calm, deliberate. "Seal it again," Reyes growled. "We lost too." "Seal it again," Hale repeated, his tone colder. "No record, no report." Then the line went dead. Hours passed in confusion. Medics tended Miriam, though nothing could reverse what the salt had carved into her eyes. She murmured broken prayers, fragments of psalms, though each word sounded like plea more than faith. Her sight was gone. Her belief was breaking. Reyes stayed silent. His wound from the shard bled through the bandages. He refused treatment until Miriam was stable, though stable was a word that meant nothing anymore. I sat apart from them, notebook open. My hands shook, but I wrote. I wrote because silence felt heavier. I wrote because if I didn't, the sound would drown me. Salt grains still shifted inside my head, the rhythm of falling dust repeating without end. I thought leaving the cave would free me. But the cave had followed. I recorded what I remembered. Navarro's defiance, Miriam's collapse, Anton's prayer swallowed mid-breath. I wrote Hale's words exactly as I heard them. Seal it again, as if this was routine, as if this had happened before. That thought lodged in me deeper than fear. They knew. They had always known. Michael was not the perfect figure we had been told, not the blade of light unbroken. He had judged where judgment was forbidden. He had been chained, not exalted. And still the church built monuments in his name. Still they prayed to him, called him protector. What kind of protector waits behind salt, screaming? I closed the notebook, but the words did not close with it. The memory of the chamber pressed against my skull, the feathers splitting, the voice repeating our own arguments, the bell of salt ringing where no bell should be. Navarro's eyes, frozen in disbelief, Miriam's sight burned white. Anton gone into silence. I wanted to believe this was anomaly. I wanted to believe it ended with the collapse, but Hale's voice on the radio told me otherwise. This was not discovery. It was maintenance. We weren't the first. We would not be the last. Rome kept watch, not for history, but for survival. The desert wind rose. Sand carried salt into the air, brushing against my skin, stinging my lips. I heard it then, faint beneath the rustle of wind, the sound of grains striking stone, a fall too steady to be natural, the sound from the first night, the sound that had begun everything. I wrote it again, the words thin on the page, the same as before. Log, 0401 hours. A sound came from the salt. It was with me still, though the cave lay buried behind me. It would be with me always, because the salt does not keep silence. It remembers, it listens, it waits. I don't know how many days have passed since we left the desert. I measure time only by the sound that never leaves me, the steady fall of grains against stone. The others sleep or try to, but I remain awake, writing, because silence feels like complicity. I'm not certain who will read this. Perhaps no one. Perhaps it will be sealed beside all the other records Rome keeps hidden. But if it escapes, let it be record, not rumor. They have already moved to bury the site again. Orders arrived before the dust settled. The structure will be covered, disguised, erased from the maps. The world will go on believing the caves of Qumran hold only fragments of scripture, fragile papers folded into clay jars, no mention of wings bound in salt, no record of a voice chained for judgment. That is how they keep order. That is how they keep faith alive. I wonder if faith can survive knowing its protector was punished. I wonder if truth can survive being buried in salt forever. But wondering changes nothing. The order is the same. Seal it again. Always seal it again. If you are reading this, know that what we saw was not anomaly. It was ritual, repeated. Navarro is not the first to be consumed. Anton is not the first to vanish in prayer. Miriam will not be the last to lose sight. We were only one more witness in a chain of witnesses. Rome calls it duty. I call it inevitability. There is no lesson in this, no warning I can offer to change what will come. Only the sound remains, the rhythm of salt remembering itself, the cadence of judgment that does not sleep. Even now, far from the desert, I hear it, in the hum of traffic, in the tap of rain. In the scratch of my own pen against paper, it waits in every silence. If the salt crumbles to dust, the voice will not be buried, and neither will we. When they finally released me, I boarded a flight back to Chicago. The city looked unchanged from above, grids of light stretching out beneath the wing. But when the wheels struck the runway, I heard it again, the faint scatter, the same brittle sound of grains falling in rhythm. I told myself it was the brakes, the rattle of machinery. But I knew better. The salt had traveled with me. In my apartment, the noises of ordinary life did not erase it. The radiator hissed, the pipes groaned, traffic bled through the glass. Still I heard the cadence, always underneath, like a metronome no one else could follow. I stopped opening the blinds. I stopped answering the phone. The world outside carried on. Inside, the desert remained. I caught myself listening to trivial sounds, the spill of sugar into coffee, the crunch of snow under boots, the whisper of paper when I turned a page. Every sound turned foreign, suspicious, as though the salt was reminding me it could take any shape, any voice. It never let me forget. Sometimes I imagine Anton still kneeling in the chamber, still praying, swallowed whole but not silenced. Sometimes I think Miriam hears the same rhythm in her blindness, each step guided by it. Maybe Navarro is still there too, not gone, but echoing, fractured into the choir. Maybe that is why the voice multiplies, because it never loses what it claims. I don't tell anyone. Not the Institute, not the church, not the colleagues who would laugh or pity. This record is the only confession. Because what waits in the salt is not myth, not relic, not dead. It's memory, alive and growing. If the salt crumbles to dust, the voice will not be buried, and neither will we.